Money makes the world go round, but is it also the root of all evil? Or maybe it's both. Who knows?
Ka-ching, ka-ching.
There we go. Hey, it's Alex from Los Angeles.
And it's Karan from San Francisco. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with a very different background, but were both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it to three of our favorite movies. So, Alex, what is the topic of the day?
Yeah, so today's topic is money. These are our movies that shaped our thoughts on money. So we got tax day coming up soon here in the United States. So, not that money is not always on some people's mind, but definitely now there's a lot of money on the mind as you get those tax forms filled out and things. So we thought, this is a good opportunity to look at how money is portrayed in film and what the movies have told us about the value or non-value or effect of money. So yeah, Karan, how did you approach this list, or what are your thoughts on money?
I would be lying to say that money didn't matter. Of course it matters. And I don't think that I can say that I grew up in a way where there was either overabundance of money, or I also didn't grow up the way a lot of people unfortunately grew up, where things were really hard. Like we were okay to good. So with that in mind, I think my perspective has been shaped really by how I was raised, which was that this matters to a degree, but it's obviously not the end of it all. And I think as I've grown older, in a weird way, it's never been a goal, like when I'm thinking about big life decisions or choices, jobs, whatever big steps in my life, this has never been in the top three. And there's a part of me that's kind of even pushed myself that, maybe it should be, maybe I should be making this more. And so I feel like what I'm saying is, and you can hear that in my voice, I suppose, which is that I have a bit of a, love-hate sort of relationship, or which I feel like a lot of people do, where the society and the world tells you one way, but I'm always rejecting it. And then a part of me is embracing it, or even wanting to do more in that direction, but then pulling back, immediately. So that's sort of how I've gone back and forth on this. And I think my list of movies represents that.
My upbringing was, I think, similar to yours in the sense that, we didn't have an abundance of money, but we also weren't struggling at the same time. So I think comfortable might be a word to describe that, though. In being someone who went to private school in high school at a like all boys sort of not cheap private school, I was surrounded by a lot of people who had lots and lots of money, so I definitely could see sort of what that was like. Like you, it was never really been a goal for me necessarily, but in the society we live in, it is a requirement. Like I think there's this quote that the only animal on the planet Earth that needs to pay to live are humans. Take whether that's good or bad, probably bad, but it's an interesting thing to think about sometimes. So it is a requirement, but how much of a part it plays in your life. And then also, when I was looking at my list, and something I think about too is like, what is the effect that money has on people? Either more so having it than not having it, but a little bit of that too. It's like, when you don't have money, how do you view money? And when you have money, what does that do to change a person? Does it change a person, or does it just reflect more strongly who that person is? But I definitely do feel that money does for sure affect people.
Definitely.
In different ways, especially having a lot of it can have effects on who the person is, how they act, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so should we get into our lists?
Yeah, let's dive right in. Why don't we start with your number 3 movie that shaped your thoughts on money?
My number 3 is a movie called Love is Strange from 2014, starring John Lithgow, Alfred Molina, directed by Ira Sachs, written by him as well. Quick IMDb summary on the movie. After Ben and George get married, George is fired from his teaching post, forcing them to stay with friends separately while they sell their place and look for cheaper housing. So I put this movie on my list because, as we were discussing, and especially on film, I think a lot of money related movies really show the bad side of people, the lack of it or the excess of it really changes people for the worse. But this idea of the constancy of love and relationship and such through ups and downs of money or whatever circumstances you have in life is not really explored that much. And so when I watched this movie right when it came out, at that time I was living in LA, and I would, make it a point to watch every sort of big to small movie pretty much if it appealed to me in certain ways. And Ira Sachs is definitely a director that I've watched other movies from, who's just very insightful and brilliant and low key and real, but always has something very deep and meaningful to say. So I seek this movie out. And since then, it's sort of been on my mind for various reasons. We'll get into those, but I think money has been a big part of it. Curious if you'd heard about this movie or had seen it before.
No, never heard of it, never seen it, never heard of the writer director before.
Oh.
This is my first time, seeing any of his films. Yeah, I think you described his style well, of just like very low key, simple, sort of lets the plot and the characters shine because everything else is very understated.
Yep, exactly. But to me, not dull. And done in a way, and I think it's very performance oriented, and I think everybody in the cast is amazing to me, especially these two.
Oh yeah, the two leads.
You really sort of buy the intimacy that they share and the relationship that they share. But yeah, I think why this movie stuck with me is that I often thought about that, and I still think about it, which is that when you are in a happy relationship with somebody, if something happens to this relationship in an external kind of way, like somebody loses a job or you lose money, or maybe you come into more money, it could be either of those things. What changes, and how do you navigate that? And I think this movie does such a beautiful job of showing that if the relationship at the core is really built on solid foundation, it actually doesn't matter. You stay connected, and ultimately all these two people want to do is have each other's company,
right?
Have dinner together, have the little mundane things of life together. That's what really matters. Now, I don't think the movie is that naive or about the fact that money doesn't matter at all, because guess what? Those things that I talked about, going out and having a drink or having a dinner, nice or not nice, you do require money,
right?
To be able to, share the same bed or share the same roof, you do need money. That's not just not going to show up out of nowhere. So, and that's why all the upheaval and sadness and, tumultuousness that's caused in their lives is because of the fact that they've lost money and one person's situation has sort of changed. So it's not all, black or white.
Right.
It is gray in that sense, but I think it underlines and underscores the point that if you know what really matters to you, then you can navigate this no matter what. But I think that it has other layers to this, which is that when you're in this situation, your own relationship might be very strong, but what about your relationship with other people, friends, family members, relatives? They may not look at the world the same way the way you do, and your partner does. They might have different relationships. They might have different compromises, their own situations. So it sort of has like a very interesting community dynamic being spoken about as well, that on surface or even beneath the surface, there might be people in your lives that love you and care for you, but it's not for free. It does come at a cost, and it's both ways. It doesn't mean that you're not taking advantage of them. So when John Lithgow is staying at Marissa Tomei's place, and initially it's all great and amazing, but then things start to get sour because there's encroachment of space and there's judgment on what the other person does and how good are they, how bad are they. So things start to spin a little bit, even though there is that love and care initially. And that's when I guess the differences of access to money and life start to bubble up, and you start to maybe question, judge, or resent the other person based on how much access to money or what have you that they have in their life. So yeah, I don't know. Every time I watch this movie, it just sort of underlines and exposes new layers in human relationships, love, friendship, but money is always sort of part of it. It's sprinkled here and there because ultimately money is what gives you access.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting about this film, and it's interesting, the IMDb plot summary kind of glosses over a little bit too. Like Alfred Molina's character was laid off, but specifically because of his love for John Lithgow. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're a same-sex couple that have been together for I think 30 years, and they decide
Mm-hmm.
to get married. And the second that they do, then Alfred Molina gets fired from his Catholic school. So he's actually not that he consciously did this, but he is putting love over money and security
Yeah.
too, because he cares more about being with John Lithgow. Again, it wasn't like a decision that he made, but what is interesting, I found that never really comes up. It's not like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this, or maybe we shouldn't have gotten married. It's like, no, that's never even questioned.
That's
Like
a given.
being with John Lithgow is all that Alfred Molina wanted. Okay, he loses his job. Like they'll figure it out because they still have the love between one another. And even though they're living in separate apartments for most of the film for financial reasons, there is still that love for each other. And that's what gets both of them through their separation.
Totally. And I think what you're highlighting also underlines the fact that ultimately, what do you prioritize? And I think for these people,
Right.
love and togetherness was always the priority.
Exactly.
And it sort of shows, without showing it, that let's just say, for example, for one of them, maybe love was not the top priority.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe money or having your own space and having your own apartment and all the things that you're used to, if that is more of a priority, I don't think this separation of this weird arrangement of staying separately would have made it through. Maybe they wouldn't have,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because I think our priorities might be the same when we start a relationship with somebody, but they change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the other thing that the movie shows, is that no, these people have somehow managed to stay lockstep on those priorities.
Right.
And I'm not even judging what those priorities are.
Right.
Maybe it could have been the priority is money, and then this would have been a different movie altogether. But I think that's sort of the message, is that what do you prioritize in life,
Right.
and how far are you willing to go to uphold those priorities in yourself and in your partner.
Sort of why I wasn't really sure why the movie was called Love is Strange. Do you know what that's supposed to mean?
I think it is that. The word strange is a bit of from whose point of view, and it can be from anybody's point of view, from somebody else's point of view. Maybe it is a strange thing you did, that by getting married to this person, you sort of put your entire existence and life, a little bit in jeopardy, because now you're displaced. And for somebody else, that might be a strange choice to make, versus for these people, that's not even a choice. It's just sort of a given. So in that sense, how you view love is strange. And then it's also strange that an act that was done purely out of love can have such strange outcomes and repercussions. They didn't think about that. And then it takes these really comedic, odd tones where suddenly this old couple is, face to face with other family members, the young gay culture that maybe they were or weren't a part of. And it's sort of leading to all these strange outcomes. So that's how I read it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you checked it out. And I'm curious what you thought of Ira Sachs, because all of his movies are like this. They're simple and low-key. Money always plays a role, and housing always plays a role in some way, because he's a very New York writer and filmmaker, and getting an apartment famously is very difficult in New York, which is I guess no longer just New York's claim to fame. It's probably San Francisco as well, and other places too. But
LA too,
for the longest time, New York was this place that if you get something, you never let it go or what have you. So he always has these flavors, but it's all told from a point of view of relationships and humanity.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I thought the film was fine. I actually did find it kind of dull in parts and most. Yeah, it's sort of like it never kind of got going. But for me, the performances of Lithgow and Alfred Molina are two actors that I really like a lot. That kind of got me through the film that I found kind of like meandery. But I mean, I understand what he was trying to do. Sometimes holding a shot for way longer than I necessarily would have if I was directing it, but I get what he was trying to do. So I don't think I'll necessarily seek out any of his other films, but I wouldn't leave the room if one was on either, kind of thing.
Yeah, it can be a tad dull here and there, but I think I've watched it now a few times for whatever reason, and it's grown in my mind, and it's sort of one of those movies that stays with you. Well, I'm glad you checked it out. All right, what is your number 3?
Yeah, so my number 3 film is The Game from 1997. This is a film directed by David Fincher, starring Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, and the IMDb plot summary is: After a wealthy San Francisco banker is given an opportunity to participate in a mysterious game, his life is turned upside down as he begins to question if it might really be a concealed conspiracy to destroy him. So this is a 90s Fincher, early Fincher thriller that definitely came to mind when we started discussing this topic, because it very much revolves around money and what money can do to a person, how money is a bubble around someone and how it can affect them. Yeah, before I get into more thoughts, just curious if you'd seen this film before.
Oh yeah, I'd seen it before, although I didn't remember much of it. All I remembered was that it was very dark and menacing and what have you. That's all I remembered. I
Yeah.
think I watched it when I wasn't even in the US, so I had no memory that this was in San Francisco. So
Oh,
it was
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of fun to revisit it. And I actually had to drive to downtown the next day. So a part of me was a little bit weary of just, driving through parking lots and alleys
Yeah.
in downtown San Francisco. I'm like, oh gosh, is this real? Is this a game? What's going to happen to me? But
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun to revisit it.
Yeah. It's definitely like a fun sort of early Fincher when he was a lot more like Hitchcock, very Hitchcock, sort of riffing on him a lot. But yeah, so this movie to me is, again, like Michael Douglas' character is this really rich guy who was born a rich person. His family was rich, I think also came from finance, but he has this bubble around him. Like, he's clearly not happy. He's lonely. He's divorced. I think maybe no, divorced once, lives alone in this giant house. In the beginning of the movie, he's basically just talks to his maid, little small talk, goes to his office, talks to his assistant a little bit. A lot of the shots are like wide shots of him in these big rooms where it's just showing his isolation and how the money that he has really just makes him lonely. It's his birthday, I think, in the first day of the film, and he goes home by himself, reheats a hamburger in the microwave, has a little, birthday cupcake, eats in front of the TV, like incredibly alone and isolated. I think that's what money can do to people that are really well off. And then he meets his brother, who he hadn't seen in a couple of years, and then he's introduced to this game. And essentially, it's his birthday present. And what this game does, I think, in the course of this film, is really teaches Michael Douglas what's really important to him and what's important to life, and that money isn't really what makes him happy, because he's clearly unhappy. But I don't think he really realizes that. There's even a scene in the beginning of the film where he meets somebody else who's also done the game, and the guy's like, "Well, I won't really tell you what it is, but I'll just say it's some Bible quote about, like, once I was blind and now I can see." And that's what he leaves him with. And I think that, again, is a message of the game, and really of life too, that you were blinded before by this money that he had and the security, and security meaning like financial security. And Michael Douglas really didn't understand what was the most important thing to him. And over the course of the film, he has to, after all his money gets taken away by the game, he's on his own. He now has to start relying on other people for help. Whether they're strangers. He even goes back to his ex-wife. He starts realizing that he needs other people in his life to succeed. And, he's kind of a jerk, actually, at the beginning of the film, too. He's like mean to waitresses and snippy to people that work for him. He clearly thinks he's better than everyone else, or at least that there's some kind of tier there to people with money and people that don't have it. But over the course of the film, he's forced to learn that, a little bit of self-reliance, but also that he needs to rely on other people, and he can't just use his money to solve all these problems. But he goes through everything. The whole movie, he he loses all of his money, all of his access, and he never quits until when he feels that he maybe have lost his brother. And I think that's the point where he realizes his brother, which is his only family that's left, is the most important thing in his life. His love for his brother is actually more important than all of his money, because that's the point in the movie where he decides to give up, even though he's pushed to the extremes throughout the whole thing. So I think really the message of this to me is that, money can create a bubble around you, can be insulating, can make you forget actually what's important in life, which is your family and the people that you love. Yeah. Which I think is true. I do think that not that I've been freakishly wealthy, but I can definitely see from being around people like that have that kind of money, that it does make you lose perspective sometimes on what actually is important, and make you feel isolated and lonely, because you're sort of imagine yourself at the top of some mountain of wealth, and it's lonely up there. Right. Yeah. If you don't have those familial connections that the game sort of reveals to Michael Douglas on what's important, which I think was why Sean Penn gave him this gift in the first place, because he was trying to teach him a lesson. It's sort of like a very kind of It's a Wonderful Life type one of those films, right?
Yeah, although very different in tonality from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes, no, definitely. Yeah. Or like a Christmas Carol, like that type of morality tale, I guess, or parable.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. It's very interesting. First of all, like on your loneliness comment, it's so true. When you watch him eat his TV dinner. Essentially, that's what it is. Even though it's a gourmet burger that Ilsa made with, premium gourmet ingredients bought from a fancy grocery store in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But a TV dinner ate alone in front of a TV, you're not that different from somebody in like sitting in a little hut with a, phone acting as a TV.
Right.
If you're eating alone, you're suddenly the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your worries and the sofa you're sitting on or the TV you're watching might be very different, but you're united in that front, in a weird way.
Right.
Because you're alone. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah, the movie is obviously Fincher, so brilliantly made. You're on your toes. I thought this is a great Michael Douglas performance. Like, he's just so good. Like, the movie falls apart if you don't have your central lead really carrying the movie the way he does. And even though Fincher is famous for retakes and, picture perfect cutting, I can always tell when he's working with an actor who's of a different caliber that they bring a lot of themselves, and you can see past the technical brilliance, which always makes a movie better in my mind. Versus there's some movies which are very technical, I think, of his. Even though I love them a lot, regardless.
Right.
But the other thing that was kind of funny to me was in this movie is that the game itself is also such a rich person thing, right? That at some point I found myself feeling annoyed by, oh my gosh, the whole thing is fake. The whole thing is fake. Okay. Why? This is ridiculous. But maybe that is the point. But when you zoom out, I don't know where Michael Douglas is cured. That party was great, but after he paid probably $30 million, which was the bill of the game.
Well, we don't know exactly how much it was. Did they
say
probably
a lot?
It's a lot. I mean, yeah, believe me, it's going to be a lot for what they
the
did.
Stunts that were, caused with, like just getting a giant floating balloon to catch him at the end. That in itself probably cost a lot. So, I mean, it's funny that he's being cured out of his sort of money obsessiveness and the bubble that he's in or what have you. But it's the thing that is like the medicine itself is also a rich man thing.
Yeah.
Like most people will not have access to this, which I think is the irony of it all. And so I don't know, a month from this moment, what happens? Like, is he grounded? Is he still talking to his ex-wife? Is he in a better relationship with his brother? I don't think so.
Oh, you don't?
No. I don't think so. Because the problem is the antidote was just so extreme, and it's in a weird way underlines what money can buy you, which may want you to go back to money even more, because then you're like, okay, I'll do game V2. I have that available. I can totally do that.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of viewed it as, because you're right, like the game is very expensive, and clearly, like, even when he runs into people that have played it before, they're all his super rich, like in the little men's club sort of
the bubble is not
area.
Broken, really.
Right. Well, they're in the bubble financially, but I do think that, sometimes they say the cure for the disease is sometimes the disease itself, right? Like a vaccine actually is you get a little bit of the disease. You buy your way out of this state that he was in, where his eyes were closed and now he can see. And it doesn't mean he's going to give all his money away. It's not like the money changes, but I think it's more of he now knows for him what is important. So he changes, even though his situation's not going to. I mean, he's still going to live in that giant house. He's not like he's going to get back together with his ex-wife or anything like that. Like, she's already married, but maybe he has a better relationship with him. He's, I think, going to be a lot closer to his brother now, is sort of what I see. And, the conversation he has with that one girl who worked for the game at the end of the movie seems like he actually cares about her, as opposed to treating everyone sort of like they're all window dressing in a movie that he's the star of. So, yeah, I do think there's some irony in the fact that money caused his problems, and money's the only way to solve the problems. But I do think a near-death experience does change people. At least that's the optimistic view that I have of the end of this movie. Like, he did, again, like, he only decided to jump off that building when he thought the one thing in his life he actually surprisingly did care about was actually gone. Like, not the money. He even gave away his dad's watch. There was some sentimental thing. Gave that away. He was okay with doing that. Once his brother he thought was gone, okay, well, now, I have nothing left. There's nothing for me.
Yeah.
So I think that is a lesson.
Although it is accumulation, I think. Like, it's not a single event, even though that might have literally pushed him off the ledge. But it's a accumulation of everything that's been happening up to that point, that now I have nothing. I have no money, no status.
Right.
and I've lost my only family member.
Mhm.
And we didn't mention he has this looming, haunting ghost of his dad
Yes. Yes.
all through. So,
Hmm.
that's also playing a part.
No, right. Who committed suicide.
Right.
Again, was probably you're sort of assuming he also wasn't happy with the fact he was
Yeah.
lonely. He had all the money too and had the same problems that Michael Douglas had. So
Yeah.
Sean Penn, his brother, giving him this gift did potentially maybe have saved his life. Like maybe he would have actually jumped off a bridge anyway,
Mhm.
because he was this lonely. So yeah, like I think there's an interesting parable in this, and again, just really speaks to how I think that money does change people and really help make clear what the priorities, even if you have money, your priorities should be around your family and just people that you love and other human connections, similar to Love is Strange, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the human connections is what got them through it. For Michael Douglas, he needed to realize that. And
Yeah.
again, I think the movie's really fun, and you just reminded me of these 90s thrillers going back and watching this,
Yeah.
where you don't know, you're going along the movie with Michael Douglas, the plot's never ahead, you're never ahead of him in the plot.
Right.
You're right there with him until the very end. So it's like, what's going to happen? And there's all those twists and turns, which I find very like 90s for some reason. I attribute that a lot. Like now they would have telegraphed something where the audience has to be smarter than Michael Douglas, so we can kind of point and laugh at him. Oh, this is all this, and we know this now, so we can feel superior. Whereas you're actually right in there with him the whole time, not knowing like, is this real? Wait, that's fake, but is this real? That was just really fun and very well executed for Fincher during his little Hitchcock phase with this in Panic Room. I thought was a fun time in his filmography.
No, I agree, and I love that this is back in the day when you could get A-list stars and a big budget to make a movie like this, which is just a thriller. It doesn't really have, I mean, I guess it does have a pretty strong message, but it's still not making any grand statements about saving humanity or a planet got bombed or any of that. Like it's very much a contained story, but at this done really well at a high level, which I miss. We as a culture and as a movie industry are too cynical now, I guess, to kind of make something like this that's contained and well made and give it the budget it needs.
Right, or just the talent. Like I think this movie could easily be made today. It just would be like direct to Netflix. You wouldn't get A-list talent behind the camera, in front of the camera. It would just be a fun movie that I'd watch and forget it after a day after watching it.
It'll just be bad. Mostly.
Yeah, probably, or just forgettable. Unlike this movie, which I saw on VHS like soon after it came out. I didn't see it in theaters, so I was too young at the time. But I remember watching it on VHS and just being enthralled with it. So yeah, it's kind of sad they don't make movies like this anymore, but at least the game exists to teach us these lessons.
Really good. But I will say that I don't know if he gets cured, because I believe in everything you said, but I would just add to that when you have this much money, I think it's just very difficult to keep clear sight of what truly matters. Not saying it's impossible. You have to put in a lot of effort to sustain that, and you need the right kind of people around you to remind you and make you stay grounded. People have done it. I mean, it seems like it. I mean, I don't know such people in real life, but I don't either, from the outside, like if you look at some really successful actors and actresses who've managed to maintain a family life and success, and you don't read tabloid bad stories about them and going into all sorts of crazy things. So it seems like some people have figured it out, but it seems very difficult to me. I mean, how do you sustain this?
Yeah, well, this sounds like you would ask for a refund, because the game is supposed to cure him, and you would go back. You'd be Sean Penn and go back and be like, "Hey guys, like I need a refund. Like he's still his next birthday, he's still eating that cupcake alone. So I want my money back."
I'm like, I'm angry, bruised, and I want my money back.
Okay, well, I guess I'll have to return your birthday gift for next year. I got you the game, and clearly you don't want it, so I'll take it back. I'll get you something else.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's move on to your number 2, Karan. What do you have for us for your number 2 film?
Okay, so my number 2 is a movie called Brad's Status from 2017, directed by Mike White of White Lotus fame, starring Ben Stiller, Austin Abrams, Jenna Fisher, Michael Sheen, Luke Wilson, a bunch of other folks. Quick logline: a father takes his son to tour colleges on the East Coast and meets up with an old friend who makes him feel inferior about his life choices. It's not the entire plot, but sure. So I put this movie, and I happened to watch it when it came out, actually.
Oh, really?
I don't know what made me, maybe the trailer, maybe Mike White, what have you, but I don't know. I really enjoyed it when I watched it, and it sort of stayed with me since. And the reason it has, I think, is because this to me speaks to at least me from like the midlife crisis time frame that now we are in, sort of early 40s.
Yeah.
And it's sort of interesting to see where people that we've known, or at least I've known, friends from grad school, what have you, who've gone on to have different kinds of lives, and some lives are with a lot of money and others aren't. And to me, the big kind of takeaway of this movie is that fear of missing out, or FOMO as we say it,
Mm-hmm.
can really F you up. If you're not centered on your life and what really matters, it's the same theme that we keep sort of coming back again and again. It can really, really make you miss and lose sight of what you actually do have if you start living your life always from the lens of comparing and comparison with other people. And I think
Right.
that's what this movie really gets to. But it's a very specific tone and a specific time in someone's life, which is, you're married, you have a kid, you're starting to now see your life kind of in the rear view mirror a little bit, because
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing your kid's life take off in front of you, and it's sort of bringing up interesting parallels to who you were and how far you've come, and also how far and your friends have come, and what does that mean. So it's a very midlife crisis kind of, acidic and often even annoying movie, but I think it does get at something. Had you heard of this movie or watched it before?
I'd heard of it, but I had
Mm.
not seen it. And actually going into it, I thought it was going to be for some reason more of a comedy than it ended up being.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it has comedic
it's got
elements.
comedic elements, but
Yeah.
I had to remind myself this was after Ben Stiller kind of stopped making out and out comedies and is
Right.
sort of now in this other space. And Mike White goes back and forth between the two.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd not seen it, but I had heard of it, and I really liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It resonated with me in a lot of ways, and I thought it was talking about a lot of things, yes, around midlife crisis, etc. But for me, the main message, especially as it relates to money too, is you this attitude, which I definitely have had at different points in my life, of measuring your own life against other people, like in your sort
Mm-hmm.
of comparisons, right? And money, because money is a measurable thing, is a very easy thing to be like, okay, well, my bank account is X, your bank account is Y, whichever one is bigger, well, then that person did better in this, metric, if we're using wealth, right, as that metric. Unlike things like happiness, you can't really quantify,
Right.
or feeling love, feeling seen, feeling safe. You can't put numbers on that. You have no idea what other people are feeling on those things. So it's easy to get caught up in the, oh, my friend from high school has now founded a company is in this way, or my other friend is now in politics, or my friend from business school, my friend from college has a successful
Right.
job here and they have this wealth. And you can very easily get wound up on that and then lose track of what you have. But it's not necessarily even what you have. It's like, what is important to you?
Yeah.
Because yeah, if money's the most important thing to you and that's the thing you care about, then yes, then that is an okay way to measure, because obviously like that's how you're going to go through life.
Right.
But if it's not, then it's don't don't forget that, right? And
Right.
start using money to do the comparisons.
Yeah. And it's also very specific on the times we live in, where earlier, when you didn't have social media or access
Right.
to other people's lives, if you knew friends who've gone on to make a ton of money and have a very different life from you probably wouldn't even see them, because you're
Mm-hmm.
obviously not in the circle. You wouldn't even get invited to their, big shindigs. But now, thanks to social media, you see their life constantly on display, which kind of is this kind of churning thing. And it makes some interesting observations that even those people who on the outside might look picture perfect, we don't know actually what is going on over there. How much
Right.
of that is real? Are those people really happy and content? Because, like you said, for somebody, money might have been their priority up till now, and hence they chased it and they
Mm-hmm.
got it.
Mm-hmm.
But is it still the priority? Has it changed? Maybe it has. And maybe you're now seeking something else, because humans are complicated in some way in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, right? And you don't always stay to the same goalpost. So, yeah, it has those interesting kind of shades of gray across the board. Like, you can sympathize with the guy, Ben Stiller's character at times, but at times he's also a total jerk.
Right.
You can look at Martin Sheen or Luke Wilson or any of these people, and even Mike White, who shows up with his flamboyant gay life, is
Yeah.
hilarious. That was
Yeah.
hilarious to me.
Yeah, very funny.
And you can judge them and look at them as jerks, but you can also empathize with them. Like you see Luke Wilson is dealing with some real tragedy in his life with his daughter's illness and such. So there's just multiple layers to people. So but ultimately, like you said, that is the message, that you have to stay clear on what do you value.
Right.
And then I guess the other message is just that of kindness, to yourself and the people around you. Like the Martin Sheen character, who's famous, is on TV, has books, but none of his students actually like him.
Right.
He is kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
So, to me, that says, how long is your legacy going to be? How much time is it before you get totally taken down because you treat somebody badly and then you're canceled? Like, that's in that character's near future, rightly or wrongly.
For sure. Yeah, exactly.
Right? So yeah, you got to be kind to people and be clear on what you value.
Right. It's like the cost. I think they did a good job of showing, for some of these characters, the cost of what that, got them, whether it's, Martin, or not Martin Sheen, Michael Sheen.
Sorry, Michael Sheen.
No, I think I made that mistake. His cost is clearly, he's a jerk, but he has the fame. And then Jermaine Clement is living this nice lifestyle on the beach, but he has drug problems, is an alcoholic. So that's the cost there. So, that's something to remind yourself of too. But really, like, again, it's like, don't compare yourself to other people in any way, which actually there's two scenes that I found really powerful to me. And then one of them is when Ben Stiller's in that bar talking to that young freshman and she's sort of kind of dressing him down a little bit, like, stop whining, right? Like, you're saying all these things, look at the things that you have. And other people in other countries are like, I came from a place where there were starving people on the streets, and look, like, sure, yes, but that it's like her message of don't compare yourself to your friends and be sad about it is true. But then she's also then saying too, but I'm comparing you to these other people, so you shouldn't be sad. And it's like, okay, well, I thought it was complicated. I mean, I think, I don't know if they were trying to say that, but it's a very complicated thing.
Oh, yeah.
She's sort of falling victim to the same thing she's trying to tell him not to do. Exactly. It is easy to say, stop crying, Ben Stiller. Like, you're married, you got a nice wife, you have, a job that gives some meaning to you. You have a kid who's going to be a big success potentially in the music scene. Why are you, like, so sad? But again, it's like, that's comparing him to other people with different problems. So that wasn't fair, her criticism of him. But I thought that just shows how complicated the situation is, because after seeing the film, and I really liked this movie a lot, went around and did some reading of just other reviews and people's opinions on it. And there were a lot of folks that were saying, oh, this is just a movie about some, like, middle-aged guy who's, well off enough, and he's whining. Like, he should not be whining. We'll have no sympathy for him.
They missed the point.
Because there's starving people in the world, then no one can ever, unless, you're some starving kid in Japan, like, no one can feel sorry for you. It's like, no, like, Ben Stiller was going through some serious stuff, and he's learning some lessons, and I think growing as a person. At the end of the movie, which is the other scene I really liked, when he's listening to that performance in the theater, and it just all kind of clicks on him as, what's important to him is his son and the loves in his life. Though oddly they leave the wife out of it, which I thought was kind of weird. Like, they should have brought her back in a little too. He was unfairly kind of like slagging her off at various points in his visions, and I'm like, okay, whatever, I get it, but, like, bring her back in at the end. Like, come on, like,
Jenna could only give 2 days of shoot.
Maybe that's what
I think Jenna was like, thanks, I got other things to do. I have my own podcast about The Office. So
that probably is what was going on. But no, those are the two scenes that really, like, resonated a lot with me too. And I think, this is a journey that I've struggled with too, like, comparing myself and being in these circles and having very financially successful friends. But that doesn't mean that they're happy. And, money is not the thing that is important to me. So all that I wish is that they have happiness in their lives, or that they're getting what they want. But I only compare myself to what I want for myself, not what others want for me or what I see in others. It's a tough thing to do, though. I will admit it's hard. And Ben Stiller struggles with that, which I can relate to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you said, it's complex, right? Like, one's pains and learning is relative to what you know. You can't just compare to the least common denominator in every scenario,
Right.
because that's just not a fair argument. But I also second, I've struggled with this too. Not crazy amounts for the most
Hmm.
part. I feel like I'm fairly good at just looking at my own life and what I value. But every now and then, questions have popped up that what if I stayed with that job longer and just
Right.
cashed in, or that would have afforded something else, or what have you. And then when I've had these conversations with my own partner and people, in my life, they always remind me is that it's life is about the total sum of it all. And you have to look at everything, not just how much money you have, how much access you have, but usually there are other things that are more important. So
Yeah.
it's always a good reminder that I can use sometimes.
No.
Not very
No.
often, but every now and then.
No, for sure. I mean, I fell victim to envy sometimes too, which is what this movie is kind of about as well. Like comparing is envy, right? You're envious, and money
Exactly.
creates feelings of envy, having it or not having it. I think that's one of the negative things about money is it brings a lot of envy, I think, into
Yeah.
situations that weren't there before. So,
Yeah. And I love on a movie standpoint, like Mike White, like obviously White Lotus is such a big success story, but I love
mhm.
this movie because I'm like, yeah, I was in on this early before a lot of people, caught on the Mike White
Yeah.
bandwagon, because he's trying a lot of that in this movie, I think.
Yeah.
Where, like you said, it's always complex. Like they're not obvious villains. Like everybody is kind of in the gray, and
Hmm.
every argument is a little bit in the gray as well. And if you look at it on a surface level, you can just dismiss it and just say, oh, here's another rich, privileged white guy
Right.
whining, like you said.
Hmm.
But no, there's more nuance to that. So I love that. And then last thing I wanted to say was it's a great father son movie too, because that's
Hmm.
another great dynamic at play. Like I didn't have this experience of going with my dad to look at colleges, but there's a part of this movie that makes me kind of emotional. There are scenes in the hotel room together, like goofing around,
Yeah.
and it sometimes now I'm old enough that I can identify as the son and as the father.
Hmm.
So there's like a whole father son dynamic to it that, oh, does my dad look at me now and maybe thinks about things that maybe I got more of in life or less of in life, and how does that make him feel? So I don't know. Next time I see him, I'll ask him.
Yeah. You should have him watch the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah. I really liked it too. So thanks for putting this on the
of
list. Thought it was a
course.
fantastic film.
I'm glad you liked it. All right. What is your next?
So my number two is Trading Places from 1983. This is a film directed
Nice.
by John Landis, starring Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd, and Jamie Lee Curtis. The IMDb plot summary is a snobbish investor and wily street con artist find their positions reversed as part of a bet by two callous millionaires. This, even though it's not my number one, was the first movie I thought of when we were thinking about doing this episode about thoughts on money. I think this is just not only a classic comedy, but one that really has a lot of deep meanings that still
Mhm.
resonate, I think, today on what money means, not having it, having it, what it can do to people that have it, how you have empathy for people that don't have it and the positions that they put themselves in and the decisions that they make. I think this movie is actually pretty complicated or complex, even though it's also just a great comedy that's like a breezy kind of fun comedy too. So have you seen this film before?
Oh yeah. Uh, Not years ago, but fairly recently, watched it during the holidays,
Oh,
as part of a holiday party at a friend's place, and was like, oh my gosh, how have I not seen this movie before, even though I'd heard of it and just
sure.
loved it. And now this is definitely in the holiday rotation of movies, so I was so happy you put this on the list. It's just such a fun movie from head to toe, so watchable,
Hmm.
and a lot of depth.
Yeah.
That's why it has the holding power. We've talked about this often, is that really funny movies of a certain period of time, they don't scale
Hmm.
with time if they don't have the depth, and this one certainly does.
No, definitely. I mean, I think the basic conceit, as talked about in the IMDb plot summary, of rich millionaires make a bet and they basically take money away from a member of their club, Dan Aykroyd. So he was rich and now he's poor, and they basically take Eddie Murphy, who's a homeless guy in the street, and give him access to all the things that Dan Aykroyd's character had to try to determine whether it is who you are or the your environment, the money that gives you that success, which is that's an age old question, right? Nature or nurture. And I think this movie is very interesting in the way that it approaches that and peels it back. I mean, that opening montage of Dan Aykroyd, who's the rich guy in the beginning of the film, he oh, he's in bed. Someone has to literally like lift the covers off of him. Someone dresses him. They make him his food. Put him in, they drive him. Like he walks to a car, someone drives him. He's literally like a baby.
Yeah.
And that's what a rich life affords, that you get treated like you're a 4-year-old, which is just hilarious. I mean, he was given his job basically too. So it's not like he really worked for any of this at all in his life. So you can clearly see he didn't earn, he didn't earn any of this wealth or status. And he's basically a child. And I love too how the Dukes, who are the two millionaires here too, like their job is in like commodity trading and in finance. And those are jobs that personally I feel also hold no value in society. Like finance people, those professions don't contribute in a meaningful way to society. They just leech off of it and take money away. And they're the villains. Like they have no class. They're bad people. They're racist. They're not, they immediately just discard Dan Aykroyd, who was someone who was part of their club, and just shows you how there's really no class affinity much at the top. It's sort of like that dog eat dog world there too, which shows that, money doesn't make you a good person, because these guys are bad and they have all the money. But, it's also interesting too, like in watching this, is just thinking about like Dan Aykroyd's character. Like he had all these friends, he had a fiance, but the second the money goes away, they all dump him in 1 second. Like she's like, oh, you're not, like, oh, you might have this problem. You might have a drug problem. Well, you're gone, which also shows that money doesn't buy friendship, doesn't buy love or companionship, but it can make you think you have all these things, make you think you have friends, but you really don't. I mean, the Jamie Lee Curtis prostitute character does more for Dan Aykroyd in this movie than his own fiance, who supposedly, was in love with him, but really was it just about the money, right? So it really makes you question all those things. And it's interesting too, just from Eddie's perspective as well, that, the money does change him in a way. Like he starts caring about, like in the beginning, he goes into the mansion, he starts to, wants to steal things. And when they tell him this is your stuff, then he gets mad when people are, partying in that room, maybe breaking his own things. So that sense of possession. But there's this really interesting scene too, when like Dan Aykroyd is basically getting arrested for stealing. Eddie Murphy makes some comment of like, oh no, we got to like send him up the river and be hard on him, because that's the only way to teach him a lesson. It's like, dude, you were just out on the street. Like, do you not remember that, not having money puts you in positions where you have to do desperate things? And I think that's something that this movie does a great job of too, like showing you that judging people who are less fortunate for the decisions they make, you don't know what was going on in their mind. You don't know they had to steal that money because it's the only way they can pay their kid. You would have done the same thing probably in that situation. I mean, I know I would, right? Like you see desperate people or people out on the streets or people that are less fortunate and sort of jumping to, oh, I would never be able to like live like that or make these decisions. Like, well, you don't really know until you're put in them, which I think also this movie does a great job of showing, where, Dan Aykroyd is now, living a life of crime, drinking all the time. That's just, it's not because he's a bad person. It's because that's the situation that he's in. And I think this is a very important life lesson.
It's a very empathizing movie in that sense, because you empathize with both of them. Even the rich baby, like you said, you feel sorry for the stuff that he has to endure now. So it is more about the situation as opposed to the human being. Although sometimes that can go out of hand, meaning a person can get so altered based on the situation that then at some point you have to take some ownership of your actions. It is very situational. And I think if you look at it from a more empathetic point of view, I think you see more of the why as opposed to just a judgment.
Right. Which I think is an important lesson to remember, especially when it comes to, money and the people that are less fortunate, right? It doesn't buy character, it doesn't buy friends, it doesn't buy love. And not having it means you're making decisions that are very hard decisions to make, that really do test who you are. But in desperate times, sometimes call for desperate decisions and actions. So I think that's an important lesson that this movie does a great job of showing.
I totally agree. And it doesn't like lionize anybody. Like Jamie Lee Curtis is helping him, but she also starts doing that because she wants something out of this. Like I feel like if this movie were made today, the good and the bad would be so underlined, and it will also be very sanitized. Like the Dukes are horrible people, but you need to see that, I think, to kind of really understand what goes on, and that's why this movie stands the test of time, because there's something truthful about it. You have to see how, I mean, you can't help but think that how did the Dukes become this way? And could Eddie and Dan Aykroyd, could they become that someday? Yeah, they could, because nobody is sort of just at their core who they are. It's often very situational, like you said before. So yeah, just so brilliant and complex, like you said.
Yeah, the one thing that was interesting when I saw this time though, that the ending really was curious, because in the end of the movie, the heroes get rewarded with money. And the end of the movie is they're all rich now on a desert island, and that's the reward, which sort of goes against, I think, what the movie was trying to get at. So maybe that's just the 80s creeping its ugly head into things. Like that was a very garish and, you know, in my mind, like backwards decade where the wrong things were focused on, and it was very materialistic and it was kind of gross. And I think that was the 80s part had to come. Well, they have to get money at the end, because then how is this not winning? I think if the movie was done now, they wouldn't sort of feel obligated to give them all money at the end as a reward. It would have been more like, you know, the friends we made along the way is the reward or something.
Yeah.
You know,
but,
I mean,
you know, there's something truthful about that too.
I guess.
You know, and maybe, I don't know if they did this knowing fully, maybe it's just an 80s thing, like you said, but looking at it from a today's lens, that's sort of more truthful. And time will tell if these people stay kind and grounded, or do they become monsters over time.
Yeah.
That's the cycle, unfortunately, that goes.
Yeah. Maybe the sequel would be like Eddie and Dan as the Dukes doing this again.
Yeah, I would watch that.
That's sad. I would watch that too. But that's sad to think about that they didn't learn. I just want to be, I hope these people learn their lessons at the end of the film. That's always what I like to see. That the end of the movie, because they've you know, they're now learned their lesson. But
yeah, fun to revisit. Also, I was gonna say a great 80s like stock market thing. Like what is
yeah,
it's just so fun to kind of see the madness. And I don't know if this is how it used to be for real, but
it was, yeah, before the computers. They had to be doing all this stuff. Actually, on that note too, at the what they were doing in the film, the Dukes, of stealing government information before it was released to the public and using it to then make trades on commodities, was not illegal up until 2010. And when they passed the law in 2010 to make it legal, they referenced this movie. In Congress, and said this is going to be the Eddie Murphy law, where we're now going to ban, if you steal information that isn't released to the public, you'll be arrested for then making the trades based on that. Can you believe that was legal at the time? That's insane to me, that you could, if you stole information, use it and make trades. And yeah, the stealing of information might be illegal, but not using it to make all those trades. But now since 2010, that's been illegal. Is that crazy?
Crazy.
Movies can change things. So I love when a movie actually changes society in a way, a positive way. It's nice to see that.
Pretty amazing. What a great movie.
Yeah, it's really fun. Okay. Looks like we are at the top of your list now. What is your number one film that shaped your thoughts of money?
So my number one is dun, 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 Sex and the City 2 from 2010, starring SJP, Kim Cattrall, Kristen Davis, Cynthia Nixon, the usual suspects. Quick logline: while wrestling with the pressures of life, love, and work in Manhattan, Carrie, Miranda, Charlotte join Samantha for a trip to Abu Dhabi, and hilarity and madness ensues. So I will say up front, this is not a good movie. It's a pretty trashy movie, but I still kind of find it hilarious and entertaining. And it has something very interesting to say about money, which is why I thought this would be a good fit for this list. For some context and background, I watched the entire TV show, not the new one, but the original Sex and the City, you know, few times through reruns and such. I'm definitely a fan of the show. I'm a fan of the girls and their friendship. The first movie is definitely, though still trashy, but really fun and actually quite good, I think. This one, not so much. So I think it's important to state, because I have a relationship with these characters and what this show is all about. For somebody who hasn't had that, I think it'd be quite difficult to kind of drop into this movie.
Oh, you
or
think?
Maybe not. I'm curious to see if you had watched the show or watched any of these movies before.
Yeah, no, I am that person. I've seen one episode. I think I even referenced this on the show before. I've seen one episode of the show, and that's it. And I've seen this movie. And I think, yeah, I want to caveat that too to listeners in terms of my feelings on this movie. I do think are affected by the fact that I don't know who any of these characters are, other than in the 4 hours of this film and that 30 minutes of the film. The film's very long. It's so long.
Very long.
But and then that one episode. So I think that's interesting that we have the two exact, because I have no baggage bringing to this at all about who these people are, other than what's on display in this film. And I will say too, before we get into more thoughts on it, I think this is a very good, that's a great episode or film to talk about in the context of this episode. And I hope, though I know the answer is no, that this entire film was done with satire in mind. But I sadly, I feel that the writers of this were trying to do something genuine here, is what my take on this is. Maybe, but if you view this as a complete satire of everything involved, I think it's enjoyable either way, but it's less vile and gross. If you take this film on its face value, I think this is a revolting, like, jail everyone involved kind of movie.
No, I think it's pretty much a satire.
I hope so.
Oh yeah, because the TV show is not like this. Like this.
Okay, again, I don't know, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, the TV show feels, even though there are crazy situations that happen, but for the most part it feels very grounded and relatable, versus this is like very heightened and just completely off the rails, and hence a satire for sure. Okay. But I think for me it's interesting, like I've seen this movie a few times, dare I admit it.
It's fine, nothing wrong with that.
But it sort of makes this very interesting, it walks this interesting line of that a little bit more than the money you actually need in the beginning can offer you a little bit of magic, a little bit of sparkle, as it's said in the movie several times. And, I would not say that I'm absolved of that, if somehow somebody said, oh, we'll fly you in a, private jet to this luxurious thing, I wouldn't be gobsmacked and even enjoy it in the beginning. But then it quickly transitions into what comes after and how does all this go down. And it just sort of becomes crazier and crazier. And it's sort of not ironic that it's set in a place like Abu Dhabi. I also put this on my list because I did an internship during grad school in Dubai, which sort of is the poster child, right, of money and excessiveness and supposedly bringing happiness. But at least in my mind, the question mark has always been, well, is anybody actually ever happy? Maybe. I guess goes back to what we were saying earlier. It depends on what your priorities are and what your goals are. Right. So it's sort of interesting and not ironic in my mind that this movie is set where it's set.
Yes, it's actually interesting you bring up the setting. So this is again where I get into, I think the setting does send a lot of messages and does actually add to what the film's trying to say. However, I think the artist's intent was, okay, what foreign country will pay us money to give us? I don't think they had that in mind when they decided to choose a place to make this message, even though the message I think that you're driving at also resonated with me in terms of what this movie is saying, even though I don't think that's what the movie was trying to say. So you think that they were like, okay, well, let's pick a place that is over the top and garish to show an extreme situation. Okay, I just don't give them that credit. And maybe that's again, I don't know Michael Patrick King, obviously, personally, but I have strong opinions of him after seeing this movie. But you know the show more than I. So
yeah, and it's sort of been in the vein of the show that whenever any of these people try to kind of reach for something beyond their means, it usually is done in a very satirical way, and it smacks them down and they get into even more trouble. And ultimately, I mean, it is a friendship movie, right? And a relationship movie, as all of Sex and the City is that ultimately what matters is the friends that you have, even though these people are very privileged. And Carrie always has been a very selfish character. She always cares about herself, drags everybody else into her own messes, and other people have to line up for that. The show does a good job of kind of vilifying her for that, and she has to pay for it and such, versus here it's only a movie, so you don't get to see the full breadth of it, but you do see parts of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was, again, trying to remind myself as I was going through and just passing judgment over all these, in my opinion, very vile characters in this film. Is, look, I don't know the full context. If I had grown up with these, if I, watched 100 episodes of a show to get to know who these people are, it's unfair to judge them. It's sort of like meeting someone at a party and thinking you know exactly who they are. and passing judgment on them. It's a little unfair. You don't really know who the whole person is. So I kept trying to remind myself of that because, I do think that, all of these women are like irredeemably terrible, at least in this film. It's funny talking about the Brad status. I just made that point about like, oh, you have to not pass judgment on you in anyone's individual situations. Like that one actress from Melrose Place where she was crying about how she was so hard for her to take care of her kids, even though she doesn't work. They have like $40 billion and a stay-at-home maid. It's like, cry me a river. Like, why am I have no sympathy for you whatsoever.
Yeah.
I just had no, and again, maybe it's being hypocritical from what we were just talking about with the Ben Stiller film, but I'm like, I don't care. Like, suck it up. All you women have so much money from weird, I don't even know where you get it from. And that other scene, there's one of the women, the redhead, she is married to this guy who I don't think has a job. She's like a stay-at-home dad, and she's like a high-powered attorney, which is great. And then just because she doesn't like her job, she on the whim quits and shows up and, talks to her husband, like, hey, like, quit my job. He's like, okay, cool, great. I'm so happy. Wait a second. The only person pulling in all the money. So you just don't like, she just quit a job, her main source of income with no talking about it with the spouse. Like, are they just sitting on mounds and mounds of like Scrooge McDuck money here? Where like money is just not even a thing to them. And then, again, Carrie crying about having 2 apartments in New York City, 2 apartments, fully furnished apartments in New York City. How does she make that much money? And what is that other guy? Is he some sort of like inside trader or whatever? Is her
He's a trader. She's an author. I mean, everybody's rich.
Like, I have no sympathy for you. I'm sorry. I just don't. And also, though, it's funny because like I felt, again, getting back to these women, I think this film, I hope, was trying to sort of say that they valued money over everything else and they couldn't really see beyond that. Again, in the context of this film, he buys her a bad gift. Okay. Yeah. He gets her something that is a TV for an anniversary gift. And at first I thought, oh, he messed up because it's something that he wanted to use. So it's the old, like, oh, I bought this, thing because actually I want to use it, but I'm buying it for you kind of thing. But no, it was actually like, hey, I want to recreate that magical romantic night that we had in a hotel. And, I want to be reminded of the fact that I love you. And this is what I'm going to get for anniversary. And she's like, wait a second, you could have just bought me diamond. You could have just bought me jewels. And at the end of the movie, after she cheats on him, he buys her diamonds as a reward for cheating on him. Because all she cares about, again, in the context of this film, I don't want to get all the Carrie fans mad at me because I've only seen this movie in that one episode. It's like, how is this something? I have to view this film as a comment on these people are all terrible and look at what money can corrupt and how it can corrupt people. Because I do think that they're completely all corrupt. All they think about is money, 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 money all the time. She walks into one of her apartments and has this line about, oh, and I finally feel like I'm back home and at peace. And she stares across all of her clothes and her possessions, as in that's the only thing in her life that gives her happiness, which is sad, honestly, I think, that is the case. Yeah. But, that's how I had to like look at this film as a satire of how money can be corrupting people's worldviews.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but I think this is where the context of not watching the show really changes everything. I think to me, yeah, there's a money thing for sure, but I think her reason to be mad about the TV is really that she wants them to have an exciting, engaging life as opposed to retiring. That's sort of the main thing of it.
No, I hear, but she didn't need to say the jewels thing then.
Yeah, the jewels thing, that was sort of because, they're trying to keep up the thing of like, oh, she's a girly girl and she likes, that thing doesn't have to be expensive or a thing, but more like, oh, you could have bought me something that I can actually wear and enjoy, and you can look at me. And because they've always had this, like, he likes her looking good and what have you. So it sort of is a, romantic chemistry kind of thing, more so than about the jewels itself. So I don't think, I mean, though they all are privileged, money people for sure, but I don't think that is their crux. But the movie, I think that's why this movie is not good, is because while trying to make some of these comments, and I think it veers so far in the farce of it that for someone like you or even me who does know these people, it's very easy to forget who these people are for real, because it makes them very two-dimensional, and all you see is just the money part. You kind of don't see the heart and the humanity, and that's why this movie is not good, because the show was brilliant at that, because they got into crazy situations, but the humanity and the friendship was always the star.
Right.
And which is
Right.
why when they escape Abu Dhabi and are back together, you're sort of supposed to feel that, okay, it's all about friendship and such, but you
Right.
don't really feel that because everybody's been acting wild and entitled and money
Yeah.
obsessed this whole time. So, but it kind of over time, as I've watched this movie, it's sort of from like not liking it and then viewing it as a total farce.
Hmm.
Now it's sort of created this whole other commentary that what if these people are like that? Can I be
Yeah.
empathetic to that or no?
Right.
Just going back to our previous conversation, because it's all relative,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're in a place like this, which is so restricting, but also so shiny and luxurious in another way, it is a weird kind of juxtaposition of
Hmm.
the two. And if you're in those shoes and you were subjected to that, even though brought all that upon yourself,
Right.
especially the stuff that Samantha does in the movie,
It's
it's
racism. I mean, it's an incredibly
yeah,
racist film, but we don't need to get into that.
and it's
But
pretty unforgivable.
yeah.
But at the same time, when you are in a bad situation, you are in a bad situation,
Right.
So I don't know. Over time, this movie has, maybe I've just kind of simmered on my opinions on the movie over time, and which is why now I can, enjoy it, but also not hate them
Yeah. I
as
mean,
time has gone by. Yeah.
right. No, sure. And again, again, will caveat that, I think this movie is a sequel to a movie that I hadn't seen and a sequel to a show that I've never seen. And the movie was written for people that have seen those
Right.
things. So I wasn't expecting it to get it all friendship is important. Like people going into it all know that. I didn't, right? So I'm definitely giving a movie a pass on that. And I will say it was entertaining in the fact that I wasn't bored. Even though it was like a
No.
17-hour movie with no plot whatsoever, nothing happening, I was not bored because I was so mesmerized by how, like vile these people were acting in this film. Scene that really struck me and an opportunity, I think, where the movie could have gone a little bit of a different direction was when Sarah Jessica Parker is in Abu Dhabi and one of her hotel, like her, I guess I'll just say servant, like the hotel gave her, right, is like, yeah, I don't really get to go home very often because I have to be here and I send my money back to my wife. I see her once every 6 months, right? It's like, wow, like she's being confronted with another social class, right? Or of a person who doesn't have money, who has to live in two different places, doesn't see his romantic partner. And because of what, the tourism industry, right? The cost, it's like she's being confronted for the very first time with the cost of her focus on extreme wealth and going to these places, which I've been in Dubai twice, and it was built by slaves. And you see that when you fly over, you see the slums. So you're reminded of the fact that there is a cost to this. But her reaction to that isn't like, oh my God, I'm questioning what is my wealth? What is the cost of my wealth? Like, wow, so now my shoes are probably made in a sweatshop somewhere. Like, oh my gosh, it's like, wait a second.
But
I'm
that
like
is
you.
not
She's like,
Gary's character.
I'm like you. Like, I also don't get to see, I get to see my husband 4 days a week. And I won one $20 million apartment. He's in another $20 million apartment across town. We're the same. Oh no. It's like, whoa, dude, like,
no.
They could have made that into a little bit of something interesting.
No.
And instead I'm like, whoa, like, what are you trying to say about
But
this?
that
lady?
wouldn't make sense because that is not her character. She views the entire world through just love and relationship, like her like romantic love and relationship. So you meet her at this point where she's questioning that, oh, what is my life and my relationship going to be? Can we make our own rules? So she's a very kind of one track mind person. Whatever she gets obsessed on, that's all she can think of. But you're right, I think they could have brought back some of that later in some other way,
instead of her paying him like, oh, here's an extra money, go back and buy a ticket for your wife. It's like, okay, well, that's not really solving the problem here or having any kind of sympathy or empathy. I thought that was just interesting. Like, don't include the scene if you're trying to make her, have some kind of revelation. Because I thought, at least as a viewer, I was like, whoa, like, are they actually touching on the cost? This is very interesting that they're going to get into this of like what happens to all the people that need to support people that want to live this lifestyle. Because it's not free, like not in terms of money, but like there's people's lives that are, sacrificed for this.
You have to think about what's also real, like if you are that rich, this is probably how you will react.
I know, which is sad.
Which is sad. It's the reality of life. So, but again, to go back to our previous message of kind of empathy, I look at it from the fact that she was able to at least talk to this person, engage with him in like a very human way for the most part, given her ability, and then offer something out of her generosity. Like that is more than what any of the other people did on that trip,
Fair.
including our own
No,
friends.
that's
right.
true.
So it's all
No, that's true.
relative.
That's true. No, I know. I guess this is my own bias if I find it very hard to have empathy or sympathy for people with that much money. That just I view them as different species.
And I think in this movie, because that's how it's another interesting meta commentary on the business of movies and entertainment, is that, oh, you're coming back for sequel number 2 of a long-standing TV show. You have to get bigger and bolder and shinier, and everything has to be bigger. So when there's scene of them walking in the dunes and the mirage, and
oh god, they look so foolish.
They look like clowns.
Yeah, they literally did. That was really, I laughed out loud at that.
Same, we laughed out loud at that. I always laugh out loud at that, but I don't think they were laughing loud when they made that.
I know, but that's what I think the movie it does work on some level of.
It becomes its own commentary.
Yes, an unintentional commentary in and on itself, which is why I think it's a great movie to talk about. I think I'm very glad you put it on this list actually, and that it was number 1 and that I actually saw it.
I'm glad you watched it, and it was fun too, because I think this is a good way to talk about this movie. Somebody who's been watching this stuff and somebody who's not watched any of it. I think it's a good kind of pairing in that sense.
Yeah, it's enjoyable from both perspectives. Again, I had a good time watching it it's sort of like watching like some kind of train wreck or some really thing I had to attack it on a satire level, even though I don't believe it was the intent of the author, but that's
not
fine.
A lot of it, but that's some fine. Of it.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, what is your number 1?
Okay, so my number 1 is A Simple Plan from 1998. This is a film directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bill Paxton, Billy Bob Thornton, and Bridget Fonda. The IMDb plot summary: 3 blue-collar acquaintances come across millions of dollars in cash and make a plan to keep their find from the authorities. But it isn't long before complications and mistrust weave their way into the plan. This movie, and why it's my number 1, is it really, I think, speaks a lot to how money can create, envy, greed, distrust, all those things that we were talking about throughout this episode, amongst people you thought, you wouldn't ever experience these things with. But really what it's doing, I think, in this film is there are already rifts between these characters that have existed for years, but money exaggerates those things and like pushes you away from the people that you love. And, you might have some differences, but those differences aren't getting in the way of things. But money in this film, I think, when they discover this cash, all of a sudden then the brother, Billy Bob Thornton, is able to express, look, I've always been jealous of you, Bill Paxton. Like, parents gave you the money to go off to college. What am I? I have nothing. Like, I'm stuck, super poor, just basically the town drunk. The
bad
wife,
teeth.
With bad teeth, exactly. Yeah,
horrible teeth. I just kept looking at those teeth.
Yeah, and then the other guy who's like one of his friends, him and his wife clearly did not have a great relationship, but the money, you could tell, is like causing more and more fights to happen in the household, more and more disarray. And then it's very fascinating to watch Bridget Fonda's character, who's Bill Paxton's wife, basically like turn into a Lady Macbeth. And like the beginning, you think she's kind of innocent and a good person, but she's actually the one through every step of the way that's sort of encouraging the bad urges and behaviors of Bill Paxton. So had you seen this film before?
Never heard of it until
okay.
you put it on the list. I mean, when I saw the people involved, I was like, oh, I should have probably heard of this movie. But I guess it feels like a very sort of film Twitter bro movie. It has all the elements of that, which I have not really partaken in so much. So maybe this is why I missed this movie.
I don't know. I mean, to your credit, like, this is not like a talked about film. It didn't do incredibly well. I think it got an Oscar nomination or 2, but it wasn't some big hit at the time. And especially in Sam Raimi's filmography, they're talking about Evil Dead, they're talking about Spider-Man.
Right.
So I don't think this is a movie that is resonating a lot in the culture even now. So, I'd give yourself a little bit of a break for not having heard of it. What was your take on it?
Kind of similar, and I think it's an interesting thing, and I was very happy to have this on our collective kind of list of movies today, because this is a movie where existing friendships and existing relationships, like you said, go really sour when new money comes in. It's almost the opposite of Love is Strange in a way.
Right. Yeah, money leaving, now money is coming. Yeah,
exactly.
That's true.
Money's coming, and what does it do to the people who are seemingly on the surface okay? And especially Bill Paxton and his wife, they seem to be in a very happy relationship, and he seems to be pretty content, and the house is pretty good, and life and security and everything. And they are the ones who get messed up the most.
Yeah.
Which I did not see coming when the movie started. So I think that's pretty interesting. And once again, the setting of the movie matters, right? Who are these people? Where are they at? What are they surrounded with? When you get a little bit of money in a place that doesn't have a lot of money, you're maybe secretly harboring wanting even more, you know? So again, there's so much gray, you know, and I think the movie does a pretty good job in showing all of that.
The money will change something for them versus if this was like the Sex and the City girls, $5 million in a backpack would do nothing for them because they're so wealthy already. So I think that you know it is about what their station is in life. Definitely the juxtaposition between with Bill Paxton at the beginning and the end of the film. Like I do love how they frame the movie with in the very beginning. There's some open narration. We live a simple life. Simple makes us happy. We're fine. You know, they're doing their chores, he's at work, she's at the librarian, she's the librarian, she's at the library. And then the end of the movie, they basically show the same montage of him at work and her at work. And you could tell like how absolutely miserable and unhappy they are. And they were happy. It was simple. And now they're not. And just how money does complicate things. You know, there's always those stories of people, you know, winning the lottery and it ruining their lives. And sometimes you might dream or daydream. Yeah, what if I won the Mega Millions? I got $100 million, all the stuff that would happen. A lot of the stuff, yeah, it's fun. You can buy a bunch of things and maybe, you know, help you in some way, but there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. And I personally believe that it's more negative than positive. Like I'd rather not win the lottery because of all the negative things that would come across it. And I think this movie sort of exemplifies that too. It like heightens all the issues between them, and also isn't going to be a solve either. And I don't think the money would have helped any of them live better lives. You know, the one Billy Bob Thornton's friend would still be drunk and crazy with a crazy wife. And, you know, Billy Bob, even his dream is, oh, I'm going to buy the farm back from our parents' family farm, be a farmer. And that one scene, Bill Paxton's like, you don't know anything about farming. Like, you know, that's not going to solve anything, you know, but in his mind, he thinks, oh, money can solve, you know, this past trauma of getting passed over for, you know, inheriting the farm and stuff. So yeah, again, it just really money isn't going to solve any of your problems, really.
Yeah. And especially, I think there's nuance in how did you get that money? Because
true, yes.
Bill Paxton makes that comment in the beginning is that the American dream is to actually earn the money and work hard for it, something like that.
Right.
If you've done it that way, not saying that money still can't corrupt you, it probably still will. But I think if you push yourself hard, work really hard, build something, you will understand the value of money and you will probably know how to use it well, celebrate it when you have it, versus if you're stealing it literally, which is the case in this movie, or if you won the lottery, it's not earned at all. And at that point, like you said, it only exposes the cracks underneath the surface that you always had, either in your own personality or the relationships in your life. So yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, it's the value of earning money can teach you to appreciate it and have the value versus being either born into it. You know, Dan Aykroyd was in Trading Places. You don't really have the value because you didn't work for anything. You just kind of was handed to you. Or in this film, like they find the money and they didn't earn it. They are basically it's stolen property is what they're taking.
Yeah.
So that's a different way to earn. And lottery isn't stealing, but you know, it's not like you earned it.
No,
it's a really good point.
Exactly.
That's a really good point.
And then I guess the other thing also is that the whole simple life is simple sort of thing. Yeah, on surface, you can say that that's good. I think there's some kind of double meaning and more behind that statement, as it's made in the movie, is that because life is not simple. Maybe this couple has never communicated well before. Maybe they're actually not happy. Maybe they're just putting this window dressing on that, oh, our life is simple and content, but maybe it isn't. Yeah, sure, money was the evil entrant to a degree, but it only highlighted what was already going on, perhaps.
Yeah, totally.
And same goes for the relationship with the brother. And I mean, these are all fraught relationships to begin with, some more than other.
No, that's a really good point. So thoughts on the film? I haven't seen it for the first time.
Yeah, entertaining for sure. And performance is great, well shot and all of that. I mean, it is a bit of an odd one. I'm not a Sam Raimi completist, but you know, his high highs I've obviously seen. I kept thinking that this feels like a Coen Brothers movie or you know, movie made by somebody else. And it sort of, I don't know, missed some of that tonality to it, even though the birds attacking the pilot and there's some flourishes that feel very kind of horror-y, which I would you know, expect from Sam Raimi, and maybe you should have leaned into that more as the movie went on. So I don't know. I'm glad I watched it. I probably would never come back to it, I think. Didn't quite make a big mark on me per se as a movie, but the themes are obviously very interesting and, great to have it in this conversation.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a while. I saw it at the time on VHS when it came out and was really into it. I think the movie still holds up, though the ending I feel doesn't really work as well for me with Billy Bob's character. I don't really feel that was earned or really made sense in terms of what happened to him. And yeah, this is definitely the point in Raimi's filmography, as someone who's a big fan of his, where he's friends with the Coens, and he was trying to go in a direction of like, well, what if I could do sort of what they're doing? And he had a couple movies that were sort of in this vein. I think this is the most successful version of that, but I'm glad he kind of found his footing again in sort of in Spider-Man and some of the other films that he's made after that. But so I think I wouldn't really consider this a hidden gem, but at the same time, it's a movie that I don't think gets talked about enough. And again, I think the performance, especially Billy Bob, it just reminded me of, he used to be my favorite actor for a while in the 90s, and just like what he could do is just like still very impressive to me. And I feel like he doesn't really do much on this level anymore. So it was fun to kind of see his what he used to be able to put on screen. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, both of them actually really good. And yeah, Billy Bob is sort of unrecognizable and can barely understand what he's saying, which is kind of part of the joy of it, I guess. All right, what were some movies that didn't make your list?
Only a couple. This is definitely, I think I probably could have put more on this if I thought about it more. Wall Street, a movie you've already covered on the podcast. The Great Gatsby, the Baz Luhrmann version. Speaking of Coen Brothers, Fargo, Wolf of Wall Street, and then a film I watched a couple years back called Kajillionaire. It's like an indie film.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
What about you?
I had Sense and Sensibility, Catch Me If You Can, which we've covered, Wolf of Wall Street, How to Steal a Million.
Okay, well, moving on from money, what do we got coming up next, Karan? What's our next topic in 2 weeks?
Oh, we are moving in some very happy and fun territory from here after our 2 back-to-backs and kind of, slightly more complicated territory. So we're going to be talking about movies that shaped our love of film soundtracks.
We're looking forward to this episode. And so folks, if this is the first time listening to us, make sure to, if you like what you heard, subscribe on your podcast app of choice. Also leave us a rating or review. It would be great too. Really appreciate that and help get the word out about what we're doing here. But until next time, I'll talk to you later, Karan.
Where is Paula Abdul when you need her?
Oh, jeez.
My yams.